What are we doing? Good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Bender. I am the president of the Minneapolis City Council, and we're going to begin this morning's meeting with a special resolution, a presentation recognizing this month as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Councilmember Cunningham, for the presentation. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Madam President. I am very honored this month to be bringing forward an honorary resolution declaring October Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And with us today, we have folks from Standpoint and Domestic Abuse Project, which both do really groundbreaking, much needed work in our community, ranging from working with kids who are exposed to the trauma and violence, as well as working with the abusers to be able to break that cycle. I mean, really groundbreaking, important work. So thank you all for being here today. So I just want to add that I was particularly called to this body of work around domestic violence as a council member because within my first 2 months on the job, I actually was personally involved in intervening in 2 different domestic violence incidents in my ward in less than 2 weeks. And so within that, I realized how pervasive this issue really is and how important it is and how much our kids are being traumatized by this as well. And so, this is something that I look very much so forward working with my colleagues as well as community advocates. So on that note, I would like to go ahead and read the resolution and then present it. So whereas domestic violence is one of the most common and least visible forms of violence that affect many areas of life for its primary and secondary victims, and whereas domestic violence takes many forms from sexual, psychological, and physical, and whereas it includes economic deprivation and isolation that can cause imminent danger and harm to the safety, health, and well-being of the whole person, and whereas victims deserve protection, services, and resources, and whereas in 2017, at least 24 Minnesotans were killed due to violence from a current or former intimate partner, at least 19 women died from domestic abuse, and at least 5 family members, friends, and interveners were murdered in the state of Minnesota. At least 12 children were left motherless due to domestic violence. Whereas economic justice and financial stability must be named, recognized, and be part of the resources offered to victims, as it is a direct barrier for those who are abused. Whereas victims of domestic violence and their children are at risk for homelessness. And whereas we have a duty to enhance our response to victims by regional partnerships, education, outreach, and enforcement of the law. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that the mayor and city council do hereby name October 8, 2018 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And on that note, I would like to present this to, here you are there, Standpoint, as well as the Domestic Abuse Project. Thank you, and would you all like to say anything?
I'm Raina Alexander. I'm the executive director at Standpoint, and I want to thank the City Council of Minneapolis very much for this resolution and for the very important work that they have done recently on passing an ordinance saying that domestic violence victims can call the police when they need to, and to have training that goes along with that for residents and for the landlords. It's really important work, and we're really proud to work with you guys on that. Thank you.
And I'm Jackie Nelson. I'm the interim executive director at the Domestic Abuse Project, and this is my colleague Suri Loganskard. I want to just echo that too and really accept this resolution on behalf of all the organizations and governments and agencies in the city and the greater Minneapolis that are working to prevent and eliminate domestic abuse. And thank you very much for recognizing us on this special month.
Thank you so much.
You know, I'll just close by adding the city of Minneapolis does a lot of work on this issue, and I really want to lift up the work that our police department does in coordination with the city attorney's office and the health department, really taking a supportive approach to families that are experiencing violence in the home, and that includes people who are being violent, and making sure that we're connecting people to resources to get the help that they need. And the Domestic Abuse Project, of course, has an important program that's helping support men who are being violent in the home. And I say that in part because this work is so connected to our overall work that Councilmember Cunningham is now leading as chair of the committee around violence prevention, and knowing that people who experience or witness violence in the home as children, have a very high likelihood of kind of repeating that cycle as adults. And we know that many of the people who are being violent in the community had that experience as children in the home. And so finding ways that we can intervene in a supportive way with families to get people the support that they need. I think it's some of the most important work that the city of Minneapolis is doing. And over the years, a number of us have been able to find funding to support domestic violence support. Councilmember Palmisano and Reich and I worked on that for the past few years. So I think all of it collectively is really helpful. And then the ordinance actually hasn't passed yet. So there's a public hearing next week, which is important. I expect it to, but Councilmember Cunningham and Schrader have been working on that issue along with a big package of things that Councilmember Cunningham is bringing that are really looking at ways that we can make sure that, again, landlords are, that we're working with landlords, but not, not doing it in a way that's affecting tenants and leading to evictions. So all very exciting work. I could go on and on about this, so I'll stop now. And thank you, Councilmember Cunningham, of course.
I just want to echo the thank you to the city attorney, who has really stepped up and taken a lot of leadership in this area, because she recognized a gap in the system here at the city level. So thank you for your leadership on this. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. All right, good morning again. I'm Lisa Bender. I'm the president of the Minneapolis City Council, and I will call to order this regular meeting of the City Council for October 19th, 2018, and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Schrader.
Here.
Warsami.
Present.
Cunningham.
Present.
Ellison.
Present.
Goodman.
Present.
Johnson.
Here.
Palmisano.
Present.
Gordon.
Here.
Hano.
Here.
Wright.
Present.
Fletcher.
Here.
Jenkins. Here. President Bender.
Here.
There are 13 members present.
That, let the record reflect that we have a quorum for today's meeting, and so I am just rearranging myself here. Here we go. All right, we have the agenda for today's business before us. Are there any further amendments to today's agenda? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
All those in approval, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That carries, and our agenda is adopted as amended. Next, we have the minutes from our regular meeting of October 5th for acceptance. I'll recognize the Vice President for a motion.
So moved. Second.
All those in approval, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That carries, and those minutes are accepted. Finally, we have the referral of petitions, communications, and reports to the proper committees. Is there a motion for those referrals?
So moved. Second.
All those in approval, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. That carries, and those referrals are made. Next, we have the reports from our standing committees, beginning with the Economic Development and Regulatory Services Committee, presented by the Chair, Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam President. The Economic Development and Regulatory Services Committee is bringing 18 items forward this morning. Item number 1 is a application for a license. I'm going to talk about items 2 through 7 at the end. 8 are the license approvals, liquor license approvals. 9 are gambling license approvals. 10 are gambling license renewals. 11 are business license renewals. 12 are license operating conditions. Item 13 are business license renewals. Item 14 is the results of a settlement conference. Item 15 is a rental license reinstatement. Item 16 is a cost participation agreement with Hennepin County. Item 17 is a loan for Cajun Twist. I'll note that's for the Park Chalet at Worth Park, which is actually in Golden Valley. And item number 18 is our applications for the environmental contamination grant fund round, the second round, the fall round for 2018, and there's a number of them in items 1 through 5. With that, Madam Chair, I'm going to move items 1 and items 8 through 18 for approval, and then I'll come back to the others.
Councilmember Goodman has moved those items in the EDRS agenda. Is there any discussion on those items? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Warsami.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Hano.
Aye.
Reich.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That carries, and those are adopted. I'll return to Councilmember Goodman for the rest
Thank you,
of the.
Madam President. I'm going to move to delete item number 7. This was a license revocation that we no longer need to revoke as a result of fees to the state being paid. So I'll move to delete from the agenda item number 7. That's Bullwinkle's. We're not debating it. Bullwinkle's has paid their fees. That's why we would be revoking. Now we're not going to revoke.
And we're always happy to answer questions after the meetings are adjourned. On item number 7, Councilmember Goodman has moved to delete. Is there any discussion or questions? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Warsami.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Reich.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That carries. Oh, Councilmember Cunningham?
Thank you. My speaker management was acting funky. So I just wanted to let all my colleagues know and also the public know that on Tuesday at the EDRS meeting, we had a thorough presentation about the amendments for the conduct on licensed premises ordinance. So for folks who are interested in learning more about that, we have quite a thorough presentation that's available online through the City of Minneapolis's LIMS system. On this upcoming Tuesday, we will be having a public hearing. So folks being able to come in and share their thoughts about it as well. Just wanted to make sure that that information was out there. Thank you.
Councilmember Cunningham. Councilmember Goodman, did that complete?
No, it does
Yeah,
not.
okay, I didn't think so.
Thank you,
Thank
Madam
you.
President. On items 2 through 6, I want to note that items 2 through 6 are all rental license denials. These are all Steve Friends properties, Spiro Sabalis, formerly Spiro Sabalis properties, that we were moving to deny the rental license for the various applicants as a result of the properties being purchased through a contract for deed, which our staff does not believe is a clean transaction. Moving out the old owner, those who understand a contract for deed will know that that means that the previous owner would hold the paper, and we need to have more of a clean process. In the meantime, the city has filed a TRA action on these properties, and some progress is being made with regard to the tenant remedies actions that could result in a warranty deed ownership, as well as the potential ability to maintain tenant occupancy, providing further stability. So I'm going to, at the request of staff, ask that we postpone on the floor items 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The compromise should last 90 days, and at the end of the 90 days, if they were able to promote a sale that resulted in a warranty deed ownership, we might be able to transfer the licenses, and if they don't, we'll move forward with the denial to the new owners. So hopefully that explains where we're at on these items, and it's unusual to postpone a license denial on the floor, but I don't want to send it back to committee because this is a quasi-judicial issue that's already been acted on by the committee. So with that, I'll move to postpone those items.
Councilmember Goodman has moved to postpone items 2 through 6. Are there any questions or discussion on those items? Mr. Clerk.
Madam Chair, just to be clear on the motion, we're postponing for the 90-day period, is that correct?
Madam President, Mr. Clerk, we're just going to move to postpone on the floor with no time limit, unless the city attorney says otherwise.
Madam Chair and Councilmember Goodman, I think that is fine. You could also do it for up to 90 days, up to and including 90 days, if you wanted to do that, and then we could bring it back for you to be put on the agenda if settlement discussions do not result in a satisfactory resolution.
And Madam President, just to clarify, the reason I asked is normally we would defer one cycle. I wasn't clear, and I was hearing something I didn't understand coming into the meeting. So we're just postponing this and keeping it at council level until it comes back.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, okay. I'm comfortable with that,
Yep.
too.
Madam President, to the city attorney and the clerk and Mr. Nilsson, I think it's important to be looking at this every 2 weeks, sitting on the agenda, because the lives of like 1,500 people are at stake here. And while we're willing to take some time to see if our Tenant Remedies Act and our negotiations work, I don't want to forget the fact that these licenses are hanging out there and we need to make a decision at some point. I also understand the complication of a quasi-judicial decision, and I don't want to send it back to committee. So we're willing to give them 90 days. Otherwise, at the end of the 90 days, we might go ahead and license them. If there's a warranty deed, we might not, based on the quasi-judicial action. And Mr. Nilsson's here, so he can absolutely correct me if I have said anything wrong.
Mr. Nielsen.
Thank you, President Bender, and I know it's a rare thing to allow speaking at a council meeting. I think the postponement for 90 days would be fine. I'd also suggest that if the council felt reticent about doing that, a shorter postponement that we could revisit to perhaps the meeting of November 16th would also be fine. It holds some pressure over the negotiation, which is not a bad thing. And as Councilmember Goodman, she accurately relayed the tenor of the discussion. So.
Thank you. So just to be clear, the two options are to have it appear on the agendas indefinitely until we have a resolution, or we could set a particular date to postpone the item two. I'm
Madam
comfortable
President,
with the.
it was the clerk that asked about the timing, not me. So I'm going to move to postpone on the agenda, period. No timeline, just leave it there.
Great. Is there any discussion on Councilmember Goodman's motion? Seeing none, I will just say that I so appreciate the chair's leadership in this. As Councilmember Goodman mentioned, the tenants who are in these buildings, and there's thousands of tenants across the city in buildings where we're considering license revocation. Our utmost priority is to protect them from displacement, and to do anything else would go against all of the work that we're doing to try to stop residential renter displacement in the city. So this is really important, and I appreciate the work very much by Chair Goodman and the City Attorney's Office. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Warsami.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That carries. That concludes the report, which is adopted. Next, we have the report from our Elections and Rules Committee, presented by the Chair, Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, President Bender. The Elections and Rules Committee brings forward one item pertaining to ethics and government. The Ethics and Government Ordinance is the passage of Ordinance amending Title II, Chapter 15 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances relating to administration. Ethics in Government, amending provisions related to conflict of interest, outside employment, statements of economic interest, and definitions. And just for those who might be watching from home, essentially what we're doing is taking our code of ethics and bringing it up to speed and conforming it with the state's code of ethics. And so it's just update and revision. And with that, I will move approval of this item.
Councilmember Ellison has moved the committee report. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Warsami.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That carries, and the report is adopted. Next, we have the report of the Enterprise Committee, presented by the Chair, Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam President. There are 5 items for your consideration in Enterprise Committee this cycle. The first is a contract for computer-aided dispatch with our multi-jurisdictional kinds of partners. Item number 2 is a contract for risk management information and claims processing. Item number 3 is a software upgrade for something called Project Docs. Item number 4 is a contract for our IT needs related to our investments, capital, and debt management services. Item number 5 is an authorization of donation as done in the past of our IT equipment that is no longer needed to local nonprofit organizations. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Palmisano has moved the committee report. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Warsami.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That carries and the report is adopted. Next is the report from our Housing Policy and Development Committee presented by the Chair, Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you, President Bender. The Housing Policy and Development Committee is bringing forward 6 items for consideration today. Item number 1 is a land sale at 3110 Upton Avenue North. Item number 2 is acknowledging that we're receptive to the Livable Communities Act applicants that have applied to the Metropolitan Council. I will note that this includes 4 different projects within the city, and one of them is the Red Lake project at 21st and Cedar. The third item is approving exclusive development rights to Park Place Apartments at 2806 Park Avenue. Fourth item is a resolution authorizing submission and priority ranking of the grant applications to the Metropolitan Council Livability Communities Demonstration Account. The fifth item is a tenant management staff direction, directing our staff to develop a scope of services and a budget to provide some case management services to tenants who are dislocated because of the Stephen Friends rental dwelling license revocations. And the last item is a staff direction directing our staff to prepare some amendments to our HUD's Consolidated Housing Plan and Action Plan, adding emergency shelter essential services for single adults as one of the funding priorities and programming options in that grant. I will move all items forward for approval at this time.
Councilmember Gordon has moved the committee report. Is there any discussion on those items? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Warsami.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That carries and the report is adopted. Next, we have the Public Health, Environment, Civil Rights, and Engagement Committee presented by the Chair, Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam President. The Public Health, Environment, Civil Rights, and Engagement Committee will be brings forward 3 items today. The first is the passage of the resolution recognizing October 2018 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. The second is a request for proposals for community solar gardens. And the third is community solar garden agreements, which notably is increasing our amount of annual kilowatts because we are producing locally renewable energy at a much higher pace than we expected. On that, I will move approval of these items.
Councilmember Cunningham has moved the committee report. Is there any discussion on these items? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Warsami.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That carries and that is adopted. Next, we have the report of the Transportation and Public Works Committee given by the Chair, Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam President. The committee forwards 10 items today. Item 1 is the Special Service Districts non-428A districts, and it's 2019 proposed services and service charges. Item 2 is the 4th Street Southeast Street Lighting District establishment. That area will go from 25th Avenue Southeast to Malcolm Avenue Southeast. Item 3 is the Consolidating Sanitary Sewer Requirement Ordinance. Item 4 is the regulation of the disposal of fats, oils, and grease, known as our FOG ordinance. Item 5 is the temporary easement agreements for Cedar Avenue South from 51st Street to 52nd Street sanitary reconstruction project. Item 6 is the contract amendment with Global Specialty Contractors Incorporated for the Northtown Bridge Interpretive Site project. Item 7 is the contract amendment with Hennepin County for road maintenance. Item 8 is the 8th Street South Street Reconstruction Project, and that's the project designation, cost estimate, and setting that public hearing, which is set for November 27th of this year. Item 9 is the North Loop Paving Project Reconstruction Project, and that's also designating the project, the cost, and its public hearing is the same day, November 27th. The final item is the highway turnback deed from State of Minnesota for land adjacent to the Trunk Highway 55. Madam President, I move all items as submitted.
Thank you. Councilmember Reich has moved the committee agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Warsami.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
Fletcher. Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That carries and the report is adopted. Next, we have the report of the Ways and Means Committee presented by the Chair, Councilmember Warsami.
Thank you, Madam President. The Ways and Means Committee has 11 items to bring to the Council. Item number 1 is a grant from the Minnesota Department of Human Services. Item number 2 is a 2018 property tax special assessment. Item number 3 is a contract amendment for upgrades to the Minneapolis Convention Center's online ordering portal. Item number 4 is a bid for Minneapolis Convention Center terrazzo update wall. Item number 5 is a contract amendment with Life Tech Services for emergency medical services at the Minneapolis Convention Center. Item number 6 is a request for proposal to establish the city's legal services panel. Item number 7 is a grant from the United States Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance for body-worn cameras. Item number 8 is a 2018 Justice Assistance Grant from the United States Department of Justice for police and city attorney support. Item number 9 is a gift acceptance for community planning and economic development for the director of that department's travel expenses for the Big City Planning Directors Institute. Item number 10 is an agreement with the Minneapolis Local Organizing Committee for the 2019 Men's Basketball Final Four. Item number 11 is a Navigation Center Development 2105, 2109, 2113 Cedar Avenue, and 1820 22nd Street East. And I move approval of items number 1 to 10, and then a discussion of item number 11.
Councilmember Sami has moved items 1 through 10. Is there any discussion on those items? Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to note that I'll be voting against item number 10. I know it has about a $800,000 public subsidy in there. I do thank staff for their work to encourage the host committee to fundraise as much as possible to cover the public expenses. I am very excited to see the NCAA coming to Minneapolis. I think it's a great thing. It is also an organization that cleared over $1 billion in revenue last year and $105 million profit. And I think that for me, it's just these large subsidies for those with the most money are something that I really wrestle with. So I'll be voting against that item. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on 1 through 10? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Warsami.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye, and I'll be joining Councilmember Johnson and saying nay on 10.
Goodman.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye on all items, nay on 10.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
No on 10, aye on the others?
Kano.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye. Aye.
There are 13 ayes in the report except for number 10, which has 10 ayes and 3 nays.
All right, those items carry, and then that brings us back to item number 11. Chair Warsami, did you want to?
Item number 11 is a Navigation Center Development. There are 4 sub-items in that item, which is, and I'll read them out to you. Number 1 is a passage of a resolution declaring that the Navigation Center project is a neighborhood revitalization for the purpose for which consolidated redevelopment TIF district funds may be expanded. Number 2 is a passage of a resolution declaring the official intent of the City of Minneapolis to reimburse certain expenditure from the proceeds of tax-exempt bonds to be issued by the city. And number 3 is a passage of a resolution approving various appropriation not to exceed $1,500,000 for the development of Navigation Center at 2109 Cedar Avenue South. And number 4 is authorizing other actions necessary to advance the Navigation Center to be located at 2109 Cedar Avenue South. And I've had some discussions with Councilmember Gordon, and I think, and I thank him for the work that he's done. And there is a motion here by Councilmember Gordon and myself, which is basically just moves the money around, and I'll let Councilmember Gordon speak to that. So, thank you.
Councilmember Gordon?
Thank you very much. Well, I guess I can clarify what the amendment says, and this is what we discussed about a little at Committee of the Whole. There were concerns about using the funding from the Consolidated TIF District Fund. Of course, my original proposal, if you may recall, at Committee of the Whole, was instead to rely on the pension funds. The sense from the finance directors that both funding sources would have adequate funds to cover this expense. In fact, the pension fund was identified as a backup plan, but understanding that some of my colleagues also had deep concerns about putting our pension fund at risk, and it's not like we can go to that for everything. I agree with those. What I thought would be helpful is if we just defined it and limited the amount coming from the Consolidated TIF District to $1 million, and the amount coming from the pension debt fund up to $500,000. That would still allow the total expenditure for development of a navigation center to go forward, but it would be clear that it's not going to exceed the $1,500,000 because I do want us to be able to move forward and address this emergency in our city.
Thank you, Councilmember Gordon. Is there any discussion on the financing or the fund sources that are specific to Councilmember Gordon's amendment? I don't see any, so I will just ask for a voice vote on Councilmember Gordon's amendment. All those in approval, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I think that was still pretty clear that that motion passed, but I can ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Warsame.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Nay.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
No.
Johnson.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Reich.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Nay.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 10 ayes and 3 nays.
That carries, and so the amendment has passed. That brings us back to the underlying motion to appropriate $1.5 million for the development of the Navigation Center. I wanted to make a comment and share some updates that I heard from staff yesterday, which other council members may also have. So as of yesterday, the structures that staff had indicated to us many times in committee and council meetings that they had intended to purchase have fallen through. So there is not currently a specific structure type identified. I know that staff told me that they were considering 3 options. One is called a sprung structure. For the record, I feel that that is by far the most, the option that is the most flexible, it's reusable, it's used specifically for shelter in other cities, so I've been hopeful that staff would consider that kind of structure. I've put them in touch, my office called this company ourselves, and I could share any information about that with anyone who would like to. I believe they're also looking for other trailer providers as well as a different kind of smaller structure that would be more like a detached smaller structure. We also have not identified an operator who has committed to operate the shelter or the navigation center. I have really encouraged staff to directly communicate with the shelter operators. There are 5. There are only 5 operators who operate shelter in the city of Minneapolis, 2 of which are in my ward. So I've talked with the one that was highlighted to us, and while I think it is clear that there's a lot of support from our shelter operating community in helping step up and make sure that this is successful and that they're able to lend their expertise, there has not been a specific commitment made. And so again, my continued desire, hope, demand, whatever you want to call it, is that our staff are directly communicating with people who have experience operating shelter as they procure and design this structure and facility. So I have a verbal commitment from staff now that that is happening as of yesterday. I understand that the shelter operators will be asked to help volunteer their time to help design a structure. So all that said, I still have concerns about appropriating money for something that we don't know what it is going to be used to buy without an operator identified. But I also know that we are on a very tight timeline, and that if we delay this vote, it will add another 2 weeks to already a very tight timeline to get people into a more enclosed shelter before the snow falls. And so I have been willing to keep moving these things along, but still just want to say I'm still really expecting and encouraging staff to make these connections with folks in the community that have the experience that we need to make sure that this is a hospitable and habitable place for people. And I know that we're also relying heavily on the county and our partners in the community, the Red Lake Tribe and MUD and NAW and the other community partners that have stepped up and are now volunteering their time, going above and beyond to make sure that whatever solution we come up with is really community-led, and that is such an important piece of this as well. So those are my comments that I see many council members in queue. Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Madam President. I also have concerns that we haven't identified an operator. We're not sure exactly what we're doing yet. So I'll just continue to bring up, my concerns that we're trying to do new things without new money. And I think another way to look at this, if we're really serious about housing being a human right, that everyone deserves a home, we need to identify this problem more. And we need to be very serious about our outcomes and how we spend every single dollar for everyone in need. And for me, I think looking at this is, what are we going to have in April? This is a very short-term solution to some people that are very much in need. But in April, what are we going to have? Are we going to have a process that's going to help others in our city, that's going to help us identify and work on this with some of the hardest to house people in Minneapolis? And how is this going to help the folks on other parts of that spectrum? And I think we just need to be very conscious when we're making these choices that we're looking at that and making sure that somehow we're going to turn the corner on homelessness and those that are not in stable housing. And I think that's the hard thing for me, is that, do we have anything in April? Is this going to be something that's going to be able to build on? Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam President. I actually don't know if we have any staff here, but maybe I could ask, just generally speaking, has there been any conversation about a contract with someone to come and help project manage around this issue and this project in general? Does anybody know?
So I think CPED may be available somewhere nearby, so I can see if that's true.
There he
Queuing
is.
David Frank. I do know that the state office has provided funding for the group of entities that are meeting, which include the city, the county, the state, and community leaders, to hire someone who has experience working on these issues in Seattle. And that person, I believe, has started this week. So I think that will help lend that expertise and experience. Do you want to say anything else, Councilmember Cunningham?
Good morning, Madam President, Councilmember Cunningham, David Frank from CPED. The Council President has accurately stated that there is a woman who's been hired as the project manager, who has, as the Council President, is getting started, I'll say it that way, and who is available to coordinate the efforts, the many efforts of the different public partners.
Thank you. That's so great. I, as a city leader, have been just feeling concerned about our city department heads having to be spread so thin for this work, and so really wanting to make sure we have the additional capacity so that folks who are leading departments can lead the departments and not have to be stretched so thin for an emergency like this. So great. I'm glad to hear that. Thanks.
Councilmember Gordon.
I just wanted to note that this item is coming back to the Housing Policy and Development Committee at our next meeting based on a staff direction that was given some time ago, so there'll be more opportunity for us to hopefully get more details and learn more about the plans at that time from staff.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate Councilmember Gordon and Warsame making the change on this general appropriation resolution. I still don't feel great about the funding source of the consolidated TIF, especially that we didn't have this posted in advance and engage our stakeholders that have an interest in this. I know there's a lot of other funding sources that could have potentially been tapped, but again, given that late notice and late timeline, I don't think we had an opportunity to fully explore other options as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further comment? I'll put myself back in queue and select, Councilmember Ellison.
Yeah, I just also wanted to voice that I get that we need to kind of keep the ball rolling, but this inability to understand when it's appropriate to take a pause, I think, has sort of gotten us into a corner where I don't know that we're necessarily, creating the best solution for the folks at the encampment, which is my interest. And to hear that the structure has fallen through and that we're sort of approving this money without anything to approve it for makes me sort of nervous, and I hope that we can work with folks and work with our community partners to figure out a structure quickly, because figuring out how we're going to provide not just getting these folks in an enclosed space, but like in a situation that's dignified, and then to Councilmember Schrader's point, making sure that we are being a good partner to Red Lake Nation and understanding that we've got to. Right after we do this, we've got to start figuring out a solution for the middle of next year, so I'm nervous to just keep the ball rolling in this direction when I can't be certain that we're actually helping the people at the encampment. With that said, I know that right now this is the momentum, and this is the direction that we have to go. But I just wanted to vocalize that. So.
Thank you. Is there any further comment? Seeing none, I think I'll close by saying it's clear that many of us feel like we're taking a risk here, and we're putting enormous trust in our staff to really collaborate with our partners, particularly the folks who will be operating the shelter as it is constructed and operational. And for me, I would not feel as comfortable going forward with this risk if we did not have the strong partnerships that we do in the community. And the fact that the Red Lake Nation has stepped up and is hosting this on their land and is such an important leader gives me comfort. And the fact that we have a number of community-led and native-led organizations that are at the table gives me great comfort. I just want to make sure that we are listening to those community partners as we design the structure, and that it is led by people who understand the challenges that will be faced at this site and can help us design a solution and operate something that is humane, that we would ourselves feel comfortable being in, that is at a standard that we would expect for any of our relatives. I think that should be the goal here. I know we're moving quickly, and I know that we're moving as, not with ideal circumstances, but that shouldn't lead us to make, bad decisions that put people in a bad situation. So given the strength of the partnership, and again, our thanks go to the county and to the state and to the community partners, that's why I'm willing to take this risk here today and to go forward with approving money with this level of uncertainty. I don't see any other discussion, but I'll pause one last time. Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Warsan.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Johnson.
No on 11-1 and 3, aye on 11-2 and 4.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon. Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes on the report, except for items 1 and 3 subparts, which have 12 ayes and 1 nay.
Those items carry, and that brings us to our last report from the Zoning and Planning Committee, presented by the Chair, Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Madam President. The Zoning and Planning Committee will bring forward 4 items today. I'll start with number 2 through 4. Number 2 is the passage of a split zoning ordinance amending Title 20 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances. Item 3 is the passage of a limited entertainment ordinance amending Title 20 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances. Number 4 is the passage of an ordinance regulating rooftop mechanical equipment, penthouses, and building height amending Title 20 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances. I move approval of number 2 through 4.
Councilmember Schrader has moved the committee items 2, 3, and 4. Is there a discussion on those items? Councilmember Fletcher? Okay. Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make a brief comment on the split zoning ordinance.
Yes, please.
This has taken a few years to get done, and I really want to thank our staff, especially Jason Wittenberg and Eric Nielsen, for their work on this. This is a case where the outcome of our zoning code actually worked against fulfilling activation on the street and creating commercial space, and ultimately fulfilling the small area plans that our communities support and that the council supported. And this is making it easier not only for developers, but also for our small businesses by allowing for an easier time creating commercial space on our commercial corridors. And so it is a small change, but it is one of those ones that's consistent with trying to make the city easier for small businesses and helping to support them. So thanks again to our staff for working on this and to everybody for their patience on this.
Thank you. Councilmember Schrader.
I just want to take this opportunity to thank staff. You know, a lot of times we city council members see the effects of zoning on every single block and have suggestions. And it's really a lot of hard work to come up with these very specific ordinances that won't affect the whole city. And for staff to take the time to balance that out and to make something that will work and enhance our code is a lot on top of everything else we ask of them. So I really appreciated that.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on items 2 through 4? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Warsame.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Jenkins. President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That carries, and those items are adopted. That brings us back to item number 1.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to kind of turn it over to Councilmember Fletcher.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam President. So this item, I'll admit I'm a little bit late to the game because it frankly did not seem controversial coming through my office. And part of that is I just want to signal to CPED staff that if you're bringing things to me that have a long history and complicated history and context that predates my time on the council, I'd appreciate being cued in. That being said, I appreciate my colleagues on the Zoning and Planning Committee wrestling with that on the dais. We sort of learned information that hadn't been clear. I think that if we were considering this item, in a vacuum, it's really marginal. I think we could go either way. There's justifications for the variances. There's justifications for denying them. I'd probably lean a little bit towards denying, but I don't know. I think we'd have to look at it, but we kind of can't look at it that way. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I was thinking about it last night, and I was running an errand, and I was trying to pull out of my parking lot in my apartment building, and there was a delivery truck for the building next door blocking the alley. And I had a bunch of options about how I could respond to that. I could have responded by getting really mad about it and calling 311. I could have taken a picture of it and sent an angry tweet to the company of the delivery truck and to Robin Hutchison and said, this is an outrage, how can you allow this? Legally, all those things were within my right to do, but I could also recognize that I live in a city. I live in a place where there is traffic, where you will sometimes encounter other cars, where you will sometimes encounter the effects of there being a lot of people. And by the way, that's what makes our neighborhoods awesome. That's what makes it really fun to live in neighborhoods like the Mill District and the North Loop. And the idea that these 16 parking spaces on this shared driveway are somehow going to create so much traffic when there's already 300 parking spaces using that driveway and deliveries and garbage trucks and everything else. This is going to be a 3 to 5% increase in traffic at most. That this has gotten held up in the kind of contentious dispute that it has over a year puts us in a situation that's really frustrating. And so what I'm going to do, the proposal that's in front of us is Plan B. The proposal that's in front of us is only being proposed because the proposal that the council approved that made a lot of sense is being held up. And so I'm going to move to postpone this until November 16th, the council meeting on November 16th. And I wanted to make sure to make some comments about this to make sure that we're not sending a signal that continuing to stonewall is going to be an effective strategy. I actually am really hoping that we're going to get back to Plan A, and I really hope that we can get to the table and just be a little bit more reasonable about we live in a city and we need to share some space. And sometimes enforcing the letter of the law, which maybe you have the right to do and maybe not, I guess the courts will decide that, doesn't make it the right thing to do and doesn't make it make sense in a community. And so I'm asking everybody to take a breath, be neighbors, do what I did last night. And the truck's blocking me, and I sat there for about 90 seconds and I waited to see what was going to happen. The truck moved on and I was delayed just a little bit, and it was worth it because I live in a great neighborhood. So with that, I'll make the motion to postpone. And I appreciate my colleagues wrestling through an issue that, frankly, I kind of wish wasn't before us today.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on Councilmember Fletcher's motion to postpone item number 1? Councilmember Rake.
Thank you, and perhaps this is a question for Councilmember Fletcher. We also wrestled with the timing issue. Did staff get clarification on that?
They did, yes. We can postpone to the 16th.
Excellent, thank you.
So this motion is to postpone the item for 1 cycle to the City Council, 2 cycles, the council meeting on November 16th. Right. Thank you, Councilmember Fletcher. Any further discussion? I don't see any. So I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Warsami.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Reich.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That carries, and that is adopted. The next order of business is notices for ordinance introductions. We have 3 today. First, Councilmember Warselmi gives notice of intent to introduce at the next regular meeting the subject matter of an ordinance to amend the code related to competitive bidding thresholds by increasing the pre-approved standard contract form from $100,000 to $175,000, consistent with state law, and to apply those same standards and spend thresholds to the city's small and underutilized business enterprise program. Second, Councilmember Goodman gives notice of intent to introduce at the next regular meeting the subject matter of an ordinance to amend the housing, license, and business regulation codes to amend provisions related to the administrative issuance of licenses, which impact a number of chapters which are reflected on the agenda. And third, Councilmember Goodman gives notice of intent to introduce at the next regular meeting the subject matter of an ordinance related to liquor and beer related to regulations for issuances of licenses, specifically in chapters 360 and 363 of the code. Are there any questions on any of those notices? Seeing none, those notices are given and no further action is required. Next on the agenda is the introductions and referral calendar. Notice for these introductions were given in the last regular meeting and are presented today for first reading and referral. The first pursuant to notice is a motion by Councilmember Schrader and myself to give first reading to and refer to the Zoning and Planning Committee the subject matter of an ordinance to amend the zoning code related to limiting lot combinations in lower density zoning districts. Second, pursuant to notice, Councilmember Ellison moves to give first reading to and refer to the Public Health, Environment, Civil Rights, and Engagement Committee the subject matter of an ordinance to amend the housing code related to lead poisoning prevention and control and disclosure notifications that are required. Third, pursuant to notice, we have a motion by Councilmember Goodman to give first reading to and refer to the Economic Development and Regulatory Services Committee the subject matter of an ordinance related to the requirements for administrative citations. Are there any questions about any of those introductions? I don't see any. I will just put myself in queue. I'll add for the first one. This is Councilmember Schrader and I doing something similar to what we have done with inclusionary zoning, which is look at an issue that is coming up frequently during discussions of our land use and development intensity map in the comprehensive plan draft, and seeing that the regulations that we would eventually adopt to implement those high-level land use guidance principles are causing, questions and concerns in the community. So it turns out that the issue of lot combinations is more complex than you might imagine. So many of your constituents, we've learned, often apply for lot combination applications for all kinds of reasons that a single-family homeowner in Minneapolis may want to combine their lot for, related to like driveways and other small items. So we're getting and we'll share more information about those details soon. But the intention here is to codify as soon as possible the direction in the comp plan that says lot combinations will not be allowed in the lowest density districts in Interior 1, and then to create a process by which folks would apply for lot combinations in those districts where they would be allowed. And that is not a big deviation from today's existing conditions. So again, we'll get more information to all of our colleagues about those existing conditions first, and then invite you all to pitch in as we tackle the regulations that will come likely next year. Is there anything further on any of those introductions? Seeing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That carries, and those 3 subject matters have been given their first reading, referred to the Standing Committee's next cycle as indicated on the agenda. The next order of business is motions, and we have a motion that is being brought forward by Councilmember Cunningham related to prior action by the Council to direct the Civil Rights Department to contract for an external evaluation of the study of involvement in the city's police department in the pre-hospital use of sedation, and that prior action was approved as part of the Council's regular meeting on July 5th of this year. This external evaluation is reflected in Council Action 2018A-0490, and I'll recognize Councilmember Cunningham for comments before we take up the motion to discharge the committee from further work on this item and rescind the prior action to delete this issue from the agenda. Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to take a moment to explain the intention behind this. So this staff direction was originally intended to address the concerns that were being publicly discussed, questioning the integrity of the work of the Civil Rights Department by having an external analysis in the form of a peer review from police oversight professionals to explore the OPCR's methodology. This staff direction was meant to be a second additional scope of work to the contract the mayor and the chief were working on, and ensure this aspect was included for good governing given the concerns expressed publicly. Once the study was completed and published, however, these concerns were quelled by the high-quality final product produced. Further, since we as a council voted to not fund the King and Spalding contract, that means that there is now no first scope and therefore no scopes. Additionally, for the sake of good governing, it is best for us to not have open-ended staff directions. I'm bringing this forward and recommending discharge because it is no longer applicable to where we are with the ketamine situation, and therefore this staff direction is now fiscally irresponsible. The next steps, according to the recommendations of the study itself, is for city leaders to meet with HCMC and county leaders to discuss concrete next steps to address this concrete issue, which has not happened yet. If my colleagues still feel that this is necessary, I am open to it, of course, but I urge us to keep moving forward to a true resolution of the findings of this study. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam President. I agree with what Councilmember Cunningham said at the very end of his statements, but I just want to make it clear that the community requested an external review from outside city government. Committing to that investigation, which we did unanimously after receiving a lot of public input back in June. There was council unanimous approval of this on June 29th. Only to quietly back out later, I think really undermines the community trust in our city. So I disagree, and I won't in good conscience vote on this. I know that myself, council members Kano and Warsami disagreed with this in terms of the Yates contract, and I disagree with this motion today. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? I just want to commend you, Councilmember Cunningham, for bringing this forward in such a direct and clear manner and not just letting the staff direction sort of fade into the night unresolved, which actually a lot of staff directions I think do and would have been another option, but rather just taking this head on and explaining the reasoning behind this. I have had the opportunity to talk to a number of stakeholders about this, and it seems to me, from what I'm hearing, which may not be the full picture, that folks are comfortable with the final report that came out of the Civil Rights Department at the time that we took the initial action. It was still in draft form that had been shared with the media prior to the completion of the report. And in fact, prior to many of the stakeholders and partners seeing the report and having a chance to review it, which was an intended part of the process. So I feel comfortable at this time moving forward with Councilmember Cunningham's motion. I do want to note that there are 2 other external evaluations currently underway. The results of one will be available soon, and the second, I believe, shortly after. And we may want to reevaluate the city's role going forward after those 2 external reviews are completed that are more focused on the medical professionals. For us, really the purview of the city was directly the police officers' behavior, which has been addressed by the chief very swiftly, the chief and the mayor. We may want to review those external evaluations and see if the city wants to step forward and take on more of a review of external partners that are outside the city, but I think that created a lot of discomfort actually. So anyway, that's my perspective on this. Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Council President. I'll be supporting Councilmember Cunningham's motion to discharge this staff direction. I think that this is, it is a very public way to delete an item, and I think that in and of itself is a testament to Councilmember Cunningham's commitment to transparency and ours as a body. So I appreciate that. I also think that it's important that that we recognize that the mayor and the chief did make some policy changes immediately. That the OPCR and the Civil Rights Department did great work in their report, and that what we should be doing, in my opinion, is reviewing that and figuring out what are some next steps for accountability. But this constant sort of grading of the Civil Rights Department's work is, I think, we've gotten to a point where we should be focused on accountability, not whether or not the Civil Rights Department did a good job. I think that it's it's obvious that they have. And so everything's been like this focused on this review and this informal grading of our department's work, when we should be focused on what are the next steps in terms of accountability regarding this situation. And so that's where I want to sort of aim our efforts. How are we holding ourselves and the city accountable moving forward? And I think that we just need to the work has been done, and we know we don't necessarily know exactly what the next steps are, but we know that the next step should be accountability and not a retread of this same work. So with that, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kano.
Thank you, Madam President. As the Chair of Public Safety, my message is more around how can we use this opportunity to have more consistency in the decisions that we make moving forward around issues that are pretty public and have a high profile. So at the time when the ketamine issue happened, I felt like there was a lot of pressure on me to have a response, to demonstrate how our Public Safety Committee was tackling this issue. And I feel like we're kind of dialing back on some of that. And I don't know if it's just like a matter of time and now things are more clear and there's been more conversations. But as I look back on this year and still hope that the members of our Public Safety Committee can more strongly hold the reins of the conversation of public safety in our city, that's an invitation to see what we can do together. I realize that this year is almost coming to a close, and I know you guys aren't going to like this, but pretty much my schedule is already booked out until December 7th, and then we have our two final council meetings of the year, December 7th and December 15th. And so in a way, this year is almost done. And we only have 2 more public safety committees this year, and then we have 3 more years of governing together. And so for me, I want us to reflect on that experience and to see what happened, what we could have done better, what we could have done more strongly as a team, and that involves working with the mayor's office. And I believe there's going to be more situations like this where something really big in public is going to happen, and there's going to be pressure either from the public or from the media to have us comment or say things or take actions. And just looking at the whole way that the ketamine issue really played out, and I'll say that when it initially was discussed publicly, because I was not one of the folks that was informed internally about the situation, I ended up learning about it much later. That it would be great if there could just be more collaboration and discussion and deliberation before jumping into to do something that later we're going to be changing our mind on, just because for me personally, I'm just struggling with the mixed messages that we seem to be sending on things like the encampment, on things like ketamine, and I just want to be able to work with folks in a more predictable, consistent manner to have some of these decisions have long-lasting impact. And so initially when the ketamine issue surfaced, my first question was, what is the county doing on this? What are the medical staff members who are responding to these situations? Why are they taking orders from MPD? Why are they letting MPD influence them so much? So that was my gut reaction to that discussion. It was not primarily to go towards the MPD officers, and luckily we do have a layer of government whose main job is to do that, which is the mayor's office and the chief. And they did have a good response, and I supported that response at the time. So I just want to say, this is an invitation for us to really figure out what is it that we want to do with public safety as a committee in the coming 3 years. I am starting conversations with council members about doing a strategic planning session with us in December to figure out what is it that our committee needs to have more of an impact on this conversation. Some of that work is connected to economic development. Some of that work is connected to public health. And I think some of us are dynamic enough to understand those connections and are working on those very rigorously. But our committee, it's going to start meeting twice a month now next year. And so there's going to be more windows of opportunity to provide leadership on excessive force issues, on the off-duty police program that we have. And so I just want to say that for me as an elected official, I've been struggling with this topic because of this hot and cold relationship to it. And then and then just knowing that this is going to be one of the many instances where we're called upon for leadership, and would really welcome the ability to just communicate more with council members, to have council members reach out to me more directly. You have my cell phone number. You can text me. I pretty much pick up the phone anytime that there's an emergency. So I would love to be able to see how we can develop a more consistent and predictable way to approach this as a team, understanding that it's both the mayor's office and the city council that need to help our city in these moments.
Thank you. Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll be supporting Councilmember Cunningham's motion. I also want to echo Councilmember Ellison's point about transparency and thanking Councilmember Cunningham for bringing this up. I think that this is a great step forward in how we should be governing, and it's a way, and I applaud again Councilmember Cunningham for taking this very clear step instead of things just fading away, putting this out in the public and really involving them in the discussion. The ketamine issue has affected all of us in every ward, not just having concerned constituents, but also victims. And this, I feel, is more compassionate to include them in the decisions we make, to let them know we feel confident in some of the policies, and where our questions are now are with the county and how that works. And that's where we're pushing it. And if we're wrong, we will hear from our constituents. And I think that empowers them in a way that I think is going to really set us up for success in the future.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate Councilmember Cano's efforts to bring all of our public safety priorities together. There are a lot of them on this council, and to help us organize them. I wanted to point out, per some other comments, that this isn't about auditing civil rights, but rather it was about auditing our police department, which is where all the public blame came from. Within civil rights, we have to acknowledge that there was a major data breach. That was an issue. It biased the report. It creates a serious liability issue in civil rights. So to say they are perfect or that the issue is resolved is false, and I think it's not holding ourselves accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to just clarify that there has not been any determination of who shared a draft report with the press, and it certainly has not been determined that came from within the Civil Rights Department. There were many staff in outside of the city that had access to that report. And frankly, I think maybe it's important to just pause and recognize that when Councilmember Cunningham brought this to committee for our consideration as a staff direction, that was in close collaboration with the Civil Rights Department that had been leading this work, and the intention was to work with a national organization of which they are a member to provide assurance to policymakers and others who were calling into question the validity of the report that our Civil Rights Department had proposed. And he was working closely with the department to make sure that their work was completed and, if necessary, reviewed by an organization that they had recommended that they are a partner of within a national organization that does similar work, which was a very different thing than the report that we all learned about in the newspaper, which was hiring a national firm at a very large expense. And so I think that has changed, in addition to all the other things that have changed since the final report was published. Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam President. Just want to note too, I think the context that everybody has to remember is that this was passed and then the mayor's office worked on a proposal. We ended up deciding that proposal seemed like it was going to be duplicating a lot of the work that had already been completed and was probably disproportionate in terms of spending to what we actually needed. I think I initially was picturing more of a peer review, something that was just more sort of, looking over the data that had been looked at. And I think we're pretty clear that it's a fairly limited data set. It wouldn't be hard for somebody else to get their eyes on it and look at it, but there's not, redoing the work isn't going to generate a lot of different results because the data set's very finite. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to rescind this for now. And the reason is that nobody's contesting the findings. Right? MPD is not walking around saying we disagree with this. They actually made policy adjustments and changed the way that they're behaving in response to this. I've gotten one contact from one constituent after we voted to not approve the Yates contract, and all of the questions that constituent raised need to be answered in the county studies that are in progress. They actually wouldn't have been answered by either this Yates contract or some kind of an additional peer review here. And so I think we are all watching very closely and are very interested in the outcome of the ketamine study at the county level. I think it's very important that we continue to understand how people are approaching medical experiments in our community. I think it's very important to understand the ways that experiment was approved, the ways that experiment was conducted, and ultimately what we can do to prevent vulnerable populations from being the subject of medical experiments without their consent. That happens at the county level, and that study is in progress. And so I want us to all, really fully express and commit that we're looking at that really closely, and it's an important topic. But I'll be supporting the motion today.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Schrader.
Aye.
Warsami.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Palmisano.
No.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Reich.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes and 1 nay.
That carries, and the motion to discharge the committee and to rescind the prior action to lead to the item is adopted. Finally, we have our announcements. Are there any announcements from council members? I don't see any, so that's all of our business before us today. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in approval, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That carries. We are adjourned, and have a great weekend.